So the government is aware that there is technology on the ground. The government is also aware that systems integration utilizing technology and the science of crime prevention, public safety, and security is already in Trinidad. And therefore, how do we manage it? How do we maximize our resources?
Well, that's one of the areas that caught my attention, because not only calling for this, which becomes the cost side of it, but you also made mention that the requisite training to operate the technology is a major problem. Speak to that.
Yeah, definitely. One has to understand that, for instance, if we take, for instance, law enforcement, the police officers out there, equipment on the vehicles, equipment being fed by technology so that we can have real-time situational analysis, the CCTV theater grid that is also established. If there's a reluctance by the ground to participate and develop in the training that is required for the utilization of this technology, or there's a false consequence that this technology is ready to watch over me and not so much for my personal protection. As we have advocated strongly before in national security, all of these new facets of technology that have been brought in is to protect not only the officer but the citizen, and also to provide a feed that is real time so that at crisis situations we can make critical decisions based on situational awareness. And it has to be a public education, public awareness drive. Because there will always be at the tip of our lips that we are not capable to deal with this technology, and we may be thinking at all times in the third world state. What was established prior to would have been
prior to what?
Prior to the change of government.
Okay, good.
What was established was a linkage. A sort of modeling with an international best practice, so that Trinidad's approach to crime, public safety, public security, national security would have been aligned towards international best practices, and we would have been speaking that language. We were, in fact, admired by the way we were able to get government to work together interministerially for the support of anti-crime and information being managed. And that is the concept of Homeland Security, that is known as situational awareness. I would have said it before, because when you have accurate situational awareness, it involves the media, like what we're doing here today, educating and having a conversation in a sphere that at times have been hands-off. So the media would have played a significant role, and not compromising speed for accuracy, and lessening on sensationalism. And we would have had a holistic approach to dealing with the safety and security of country.
Cognizance of what's the intention of those who govern you is always important. Having that support. No security force can operate without the eyes, the ears, and the understanding of the citizenry.
Yeah,
so I'm in concurrence with that. The area of national security we're talking about, talk about organized crime. I think it exposes an alarming neglect bordering on incompetence or deliberate sabotage, because you get the feeling that the criminal enterprise has been able to infiltrate just about every aspect of our security services. Folks feel, for instance, that we are never going to get a hold of this. Even with all the suggestions you make, even with all the institutions we put together, even with the amount of money we throw at it, we will not get anywhere unless we deal with a problem that is internal. It means a proper analysis, a proper weeding out of moles, if you will, from the protective service. And until we do that, all the efforts you and others are proposing will amount to zero.
You're very correct. We have to know that one of the major threats that we are facing in Trinidad and Tobago today, I know we opened the conversation with regards to immigration and border control, and we can take that same angle and step into that corridor, is the underpinning of organized crime. Because previously, where organized crime would have sat and strategized with regards to the movement of scotch, as it was in the early days, and then came to marijuana, and then to wild meat, and to exotic animals and stuff like that.
And human trafficking.
And then it became human trafficking, the cocaine, the arms, the ammunition. Now human beings are being seen as a commodity.
Yes.
And therefore, organized crime would be utilizing the movement of people for making money. They sit and strategize just as the law enforcement officials do, just as the state officials do. How can we make money? And there are systems and networks set up that are basically being camouflaged by legitimate business operations.
Hence the reason
And
I
the
said in
movement
his
of money.
many manifestations.
Correct.
Yes.
So there has to be a political will and a directive that we are going at organized crime, because Trinidad is just a player in the region with regards to organized crime that steps all the way into the US and into the UK and into Latin America. Now we're seeing a very large influx of the Chinese involvement with the casinos and all that stuff. We cannot dismiss the fact that there can be organized crime existing inside of there also. And therefore, what is the concentrated effort? What are the directives? Are we focusing on this based on our intelligence and our will to take this down? Because we must be focused on, in order to crumple this, we have to go at all aspects of organized crime, which means following the money, following the lifestyle, following the properties, and following the names that show up on the profile.
You see, I sought to be judicious in the way I couched the question, but clearly you saw through all of that, because at the end of the day, that's what it is. The many manifestations I speak of is in governance, is in business, is in just about every facet of our lives, not just the protective service, but that will to bring down a couple of Mr. Bigs, that will to deal with a kingpin, that will to move security officer out of a major position, pull down that person. Unless there is that happening, it is going to do a couple of things. You mentioned, and I concurred with it, that it is absolutely necessary that the citizenry be working together with this. Well, the citizenry, if they have no confidence because they see Mr. Big not being interfered with, they go like, I'll get mine, you later for your thing. So everyone is affected by this. But from as long as you've been in your position of leadership on the issue of national security, have you seen a willingness, not just yesterday, not just this week, not just this new government, not just the last government, but have you seen a willingness to pull down the Mr. Big, or has Mr. Big been so Teflon, so elusive, or our technology so wanting, or our will so absent?
I have seen where there have been attempts, but I've also seen where, for instance, Mr. Big was bigger than we thought, and in some instances would have been able to diffuse in ways of proper organized strategies within their establishments on the ground. And what has shown its head actually is that we are part of an international network, and you would have heard me said earlier, aligning with international best practices, which means aligning with international allies, because you can focus on taking down a Mr. Big and have very little to do about it here in Trinidad and Tobago, involving your international allies. Our intention was getting him out and getting him down, and therefore I go back to the fact that at the National Security Council, chaired by the Prime Minister and the Minister, there has to be a directive and a political will that we are going to go at organized crime.
I have heard that articulated. Are you not convinced by what you have heard is my question.
No, I don't think that I'm convinced enough to see that they're actually acting out or talking the talk, but not walking it at this point.
Time, I guess, will tell that. You have proposed the establishment of a National Border Patrol Task Force comprising Immigration, Customs, Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the prison, CTU, and other lead agencies. Do you think not just the technological infrastructure here, do we have the money to go about doing this? Do we have the will to, in fact, have this? And I ask this only in the context of, if you in concert, in agreement with me that we already have a problem with some of the set-up institutions, you're asking for a different breed of people to come in to comprise this. You're asking for, how are you looking to put this together? I mean, a lot of people harken back to SORT and said that was a good way to go about this. Is that the sort of kind of composition you're looking at?
Well, that would have been one of my my offerings, my concerns, that we can, if asked, what would you like, Commander Heerah, that should be considered? The establishment of the National Border Patrol Task Force would have been one of them. But I want to just go back a little bit. That is an aspect of operational enforcement. But most importantly, what is needed for border control and immigration is a clearly defined border control immigration policy that speaks specific to the strategies. Once you have spoken directly to the strategies, the financial appropriations, for instance, the infrastructure development, the detention center issues along those lines, resources and research and development along the lines of systems and security, and most importantly being technologically driven. Once you've driven into that policy, then you can see coming out of that a decision to establish the Border Control Task Force, National Border Control Task Force. And therefore, it is not asking for another unit to be formed up. It is saying amalgamating the resources to maximize them in a focus, a concentrated effort, because immigration issues is a challenge for Trinidad and Tobago today, and we're not giving it the effort that it should be. It's not just a tabletop talk. There needs to be in-country enforcement. We need to move based on the policy, based on the strategies, based on exploring our legislation to see whether we can have units out there stopping people in Trinidad and Tobago who we suspect and asking them to present their papers, seeing profiling taking place at the immigration entry ports that will challenge you on an address that you give to confirm that you're there and that the sponsor is in fact who they say they are, and that you are held culpable or answerable if this is false.
A lot of places all over the world, when you get to profiling, whatever it is specific to, it is always an issue. So in talking profiling, I mean, there's criminal profiling, and you're saying that is what we need to set up, that sort of profiling.
Correct.
To grab people. You said we want inland enforcement.
In-country enforcement.
In-country enforcement. Delineate, please.
Say again?
Delineate, please. In-country enforcement.
In-country enforcement would be the ability of Border Control and Immigration
to stop people.
To say what?
To stop people?
Well, apart from stopping people, but to be able to investigate, to reach into areas where there are suspected activity or there's a high prevalence of a certain nationality being seen. In-country enforcement would also mean that support by national security, not just the divisional police who are already swamped with issues and duties to perform. There are key agencies in country that if they combine their efforts together can move in this direction. But it has to be intelligence driven, and the intelligence comes back to intelligence management. The intelligence management goes on to what we had discussed earlier, information sharing between Venezuela and Trinidad, because there are countries all over the world that has in-country enforcement for immigration and border control, because we have to protect our borders, and our borders start internally and expand beyond our territorial waters. So one has to understand that there's a focus that needs to take place, a concentrated effort, an intensified effort, for want of a better term, that speaks specific to in-country enforcement. But it has to be a combined effort utilizing and maximizing the skill sets and the subject matter expertise of these agencies that are already existing in Trinidad and Tobago. It cannot be a siloed effect. It cannot be an individual agency. It has to be a joint operations.
The former head of the NOC is my guess. He is Commander Garvin. Heerah, while we are talking about homeland security, we talk about border security, we talk about immigration, there is a very big question that a lot of folks may not make the link with border security, though there is a very clear relationship. But they would say, let's look inland at what is going on here, the crime situation in Trinidad and Tobago. What are we failing, in your view, from your vantage point, in doing to bring a faster controlled situation vis-a-vis crime in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yeah. Well, I'll begin first with the linkage that you're talking about, because we have foreign immigrants in country. We have foreign cultures now mixing with ours, and people who we do not have what I'll call sanitation on. We don't have a sanitized profile on them, a clean bill of health. And this is not dealing with health issues with regards to their crime and criminality and their background. And we can very well have people in country already here who may have been part of organized crime groups in different countries, who may have a certain amount of, well, I'll say this word guardedly, education in crime. And that filters into your system, filters